if constitutional recognition is the way to go, why can't we know what the legislative suggestion will be now? Because I confess, most of the people who express any sort of objection or concern to me, including somebody even today from one of our major publications, his comment was, but I don't know what it's going to look like. And until you can tell me what it's going to look like, I don't know whether I'm comfortable with it. So help me answer that question.
So it's very important to understand the Constitution is about principle, okay? It's not about detail. The Constitution is Australia's highest legal rule book. It's the document that sets out the key principles and rules for the way our country is governed. And importantly, it's the document that says what key institutions will exist in our country, right? But it doesn't set out all the details of those institutions. It empowers Parliament to set up the institutions, right? The Constitution is not the place for details. It is just not. If you have a look there, there's little mini versions of the Constitution. Have a flick through it. It says things like it asks Parliament to set up the High Court, for example. You know, it doesn't contain all the details of the High Court. Parliament legislates to create the High Court. And then that institution needs to change over time. That's why it's important that not all the details are in the Constitution, because the Constitution is locked in. It's stable, enduring. It can only be changed via a double majority referendum. And it's only been changed 8 times since 1901. So if you put something in the Constitution, it's hard to change it. Institutions in a democracy need to be flexible. They need to change with the times. And when problems arise in an institution, Parliament needs to be able to change it to sort the problems out, right? So that's really important to understand, that this referendum is about the principle. It's a question of principle. Should Indigenous people be recognised in the Constitution through having an advisory voice in laws and policies made about them? Yes or no? That's the question of principle. If we say yes, then it's the Parliament's job to legislate that voice, and but also, importantly, to change it over time. So in answer to the question, why can't we just give the details now? It would be a bit misleading, because people might think they're voting yes or no to this legislative design. But in reality, 5 or 10 years down the track, there might be different legislative design. You see what I mean? So it's more honest and upfront to say, this is the question of principle. The change to the Constitution will give Parliament the power. It will tell this. If we vote yes, we're telling Parliament, go and set up this voice. But it's also saying there must always be a voice, but it's Parliament's job to set it up and evolve it over time as needed. Having said that, there is sufficient detail out there in that we know the basics of what the government wants to do, right? If we vote yes, we know the voice will be chosen by Indigenous people, right? Because government has set out some key design principles. One of those principles is that it will be chosen by Indigenous people, not by government. So it will be representative of Indigenous communities. We know it will be anchored in local Indigenous communities. Some basic things like that. But remember, it still has to go through the Parliament. So the Teals, the Independents will get a say, the Liberals will get a say, the Greens will get a say. So even that instruction that government says this is what we want to set up, well, that still needs to go through the Parliament. So that could be changed.
I feel like the debate at the end of the day, when you see it played out in the media or when you hear it discussed around the dinner table, is frequently coming back to that question of, but I need to know, I need to know. So I'm interested in your thoughts. How do we bring people to this conversation in a way that ensures it stays at the level of this is a principle? Like, how do we bring people back to that?
I think a great way to do it is to show people the amendment, the actual amendment. So let's just have a quick look at it. The first line there says, in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia. That's the simple statement of recognition. That's why we're doing this. It explains why we're doing this. We're doing it to recognise Indigenous peoples as the first peoples of Australia. Then number 1 says, there shall be a body to be called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. There shall be a body. That's the guarantee. That's what I was talking about. That's the promise we're making, that Indigenous people will always have a voice, right? That's telling Parliament, you always need to make sure there's a voice. So that's the promise, the commitment, the guarantee. Then number 2 is describing the purpose. What's the purpose of this voice? Well, its purpose is that it may make representations to Parliament and the executive government on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Make representations is simply giving advice on laws and policies relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. It's It's pretty self-explanatory. The detail question is answered by clause 3, right? So when people ask, where's the detail? Okay, well, whose job is it to create the detail? Let's look at clause 3. It says, the Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, have power to make laws with respect to matters relating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, including its composition, functions, powers and procedures. So where's the detail? Whose job is it? It's Parliament's job. So I think the best thing any of us can do is direct voters and undecided voters to the amendment and talk them through that. That's what we're voting on. That's what we're saying yes or no to. And if we say yes, the Constitution is going to say that it's Parliament's job to sort out the details. And it's ironic, isn't it, that who are the main ones asking for the details? Well, people in Parliament. So when Peter Dutton asks, where's the detail? Why haven't you provided the detail? Well, it's your job, Peter Dutton.